There are places in Europe where the fog never lifts, where the forests seem to whisper secrets to the wind, and the stones beneath your feet remember the blood spilled upon them. A lie that, like rot beneath porcelain, spread quietly, sweetly, until no one remembered what was real anymore. They called her the Blood Countess. But once, long ago, she was simply moments of trembling, of whispers only she could hear. She spoke Latin, German, Hungarian, and Greek before she bled her first moon. But with her mind came a darkness. She sketched strange figures in her books. Women with empty eyes, girls floating in water, hands with too many fingers. He taught her methods of discipline, of breaking the will of servants with precision. He gifted her gloves lined with spikes. A toy, he called it, to use on the lazy maids. And she used them well. When asked what they were, she only said, "They come in dreams. Of fever, perhaps, or poison. No one knows." Farm daughters sent to serve in the castle. They came with cheeks flushed with youth, hands calloused by work, voices trembling in prayer. They vanished with no letters, and when villagers asked, they were told the girls had run away. But no one ever saw them again. And in his death, something changed. Or, perhaps, what had been locked away finally woke up. Her skin, they said, grew paler by the month. Like candle wax, she wore dresses of black velvet, lined with wool fur. Her hair coiled like serpents around her pale face, and in her eyes there was something that no priest could wash away. At age 6, she saw her first hanging. A thief disemboweled before a cheering crowd, anonymous, frantic, signed in smudges of mud and blood, sent to clergy, to nobles, to the court in Vienna. Accusations of torture, of witchcraft, of They said she bit the flesh from girls' faces, that she bathed in their blood to remain young, that her mirror never fogged, though the room was cold. Her eyes, they said, did not look away, that the snow around Cactus sometimes melted in red streaks, even in the heart of winter, that dogs refused to walk the northern path, that the birds had gone silent. She did not cry, she only tilted her head, as if listening. One such place lies deep within the Carpathian Mountains of the Kingdom of Hungary, now modern-day Slovakia. Surely this was jealousy, or the invention of drunken villagers. But then the girls from noble families began to vanish. A niece to kings, cousin to warriors, and descendant to Vlad, the Impaler himself. Her family held more titles than most had land to stand upon, and in their veins flowed the ancient privileges of old Magyar blood. But such blood, rich, blue, cold, rarely runs without a price. A castle with walls, as pale as bone and windows, like the black eyes of a dead thing. Cachtice Castle. It is here that the story begins. Or perhaps, it is where the lie was first told. Over 4,000 guests, 15 roasted boars. The peasants were gifted wine. The nobles, gold. But was given a castle? Cactus, a gift she accepted with a smile as cold as the marble under her feet, was born into a lineage steeped in power and strangeness. From childhood was said to suffer from fits. Her tutors praised her brilliance. At 15, she was married to Count Ferenc, a warrior renowned for impaling Ottoman soldiers and drinking from their skulls. Their wedding was extravagant. It was said that the Count loved her in his own cruel way, but in 1604, he died. The first to disappear were the peasant girls. Rumors began to creep like ivy across the village walls, that strange cries echoed from the castle at night. Then came the letters. At first, they dismissed it. A noblewoman, a widow of a war hero, 1, then 2, then 5, and still smiled. She walked the halls of her castle with lips stained crimson. But still, the court hesitated. To accuse her was to accuse the kingdom itself. So they waited, and as they waited, more girls vanished. And beneath the great halls of Cachtice Castle, where the walls bled mold and the air stank of iron, something ancient stirred in the dark. Was it madness, or was it something far, far older? Something that craved youth the way dying stars crave light.
Beneath the stone floors of Cachtice Castle, where the air was thick and the silence had weight, there was a chamber, low-ceilinged, windowless, and carved from the mountain's bones. Iron tongs, hollow reeds, sharpened spikes, pincers shaped like fingers, implements not of science, but of ritual. And each had a name, whispered only when the moon turned her face away. In its center stood a slab of cold stone, not an altar, not a table, something older, something more intimate with pain. Round it were tools, cruel, elegant, and precise. It was here that descended each night, not like a monster, not like a madwoman. The girl's blood splashed across the Countess's hand. She wiped it away, stared. Later, she claimed the skin where the blood had touched felt softer, younger, but like a priestess, a celebrant of a private sacrament that no god had ever blessed. Later, Even the daughters of minor nobility began to disappear. One, then two. Pain, she believed, purified the spirit. But blood was eternal. One servant later testified under torture that if a maid dropped hairbrush, she would have her fingernails torn off. If a girl pulled too hard while braiding her hair, would order her tongue cut out. To preserve silence in the house, she said, she recorded names, ages, complexions, and innocence like ingredients in a sacred recipe. Only the blood of untouched young women would suffice. Warm, unspoiled, potent. In Cachtice, his wind began to smell of iron and rot. Hunters found bones in the woods. Some charred, some gnawed, all too small. One old woman claimed she saw a pale hand reaching from the earth behind the castle, dry and purple like winter fruit. Others claimed she beat girls until their skin peeled like parchment, then rubbed salt into their wounds. Not out of rage, but out of curiosity. One particularly cold winter night, it is said, she stripped 3 girls bare, poured water on their shivering bodies. Still hosting with lutes and poetry, she would raise her goblet, red as fresh blood, and smile with painted lips. The perfect widow, the noble lady, and left them in the snow to freeze, watching from her window, sipping wine wrapped in furs. Gah! But the most infamous tale, the one that would immortalize her in blood, began with a mistake. An impossible number, a terrible number. One day, while a servant combed her hair, struck her across the face for tugging too hard. To accuse her was to strike at the very foundation of Hungarian nobility. That night, she bathed for the first time in human blood. And so the obsession began. But this was no frenzied slaughter. It became something like an alchemist. They were hunted. Her servants scoured the countryside. Farmers' daughters were lured with promises of work. Peasant girls vanished from remote villages. Inside her black velvet journals, she wrote, "When the blood is warm, my skin glows like morning roses. When it cools, I feel the grave calling my name. The screams found a way out, but death is never quiet, not truly. No matter how deep the pit, no matter how thick the walls, a scream always finds its way into the wind." Villagers spoke of wolves howling at the castle gates, of dogs refusing to walk past the northern road. But the court still did nothing, was still attending church, still donating to monasteries, until the nobility began losing daughters. Then the whispers turned into accusations. A document was compiled, with over 650 names of girls who had vanished under her care. But even still, she was a so they waited. And while they waited, girls kept dying. Until one winter night in 1610, Palatine Georgi, her own relative, marched on Cachtice Castle with armed guards. They broke through the iron gates. They descended into the cellar, and what they found would stain the history of Hungary forever. The night of December 29th, 1610, was bitterly cold. Snow had swallowed the hills surrounding Cachtice, but inside the castle, the hearths still burned. Candles flickered from room to room. Fire crackled in the main hall. Somewhere a violin was playing, but then came the sound of boots, steel on stone. Voices barking orders in Latin and Hungarian. Palatine Gyrgy had arrived. He brought with him a decree, signed by the king, and behind him, soldiers, scribes, priests. They were not there for a visit. They were there to end something. What they found inside the castle was beyond imagination. In the cellars they discovered bodies, some whole, some dismembered, some with limbs twisted at unnatural angles, some with coins sewn into their mouths. Others were still alive, barely chained to walls, burned, bitten, their eyes wide with silent horror, still warm, dressed in mourning black, as if expecting a funeral. She did not run. She did not protest. She only asked a single question. One girl was said to have been stitched open from neck to navel, but kept alive for study. Another, discovered still breathing, had nails driven through her knees and elbows. To keep her still, they said. One guard, a veteran of the Long War, vomited into his helmet. The stench was overwhelming. Priests crossed themselves until their hands trembled. And at the center of it all, in a dark room that once may have been a wine cellar, stood a black iron tub.
Half filled.
Was found in her private chamber, calm, composed. Others swore she froze girls in snow, then revived them just to watch them die again. There was even a claim that she ate pieces of their flesh during fasting season to avoid breaking Lent.
Oh.
Do you think they will remember me as a monster? One confessed that had a journal, a black ledger with names, dates, methods. Over 650 entries, each a girl who had died in the castle. He did not answer, was never formally tried. Noble blood protected her from the courts. But her servants were not so fortunate. Alone. In the dark. Surrounded by the ghosts she had made, the trial that never was what followed was not a trial in the traditional sense. Ilona, Dorothea, Countess, and her closest attendants were arrested, interrogated, and tortured. But over time, her handwriting decayed. Her letters grew sparse. Then they stopped altogether. Their testimonies were wild, detailed, and terrifying. They spoke of daily beatings, mutilations, and experiments. Some testimonies claimed Erzsébet drank the blood of virgins, believing it preserved her youth. The church tried to keep the affair quiet, but rumors leaked, and across Hungary and later across Europe, a legend was born. The noblewoman who bathed in blood to cheat death, sentenced by walls, because of her noble status and likely to avoid public disgrace, was never executed. Instead, she was sealed alive inside her own castle. Her chambers were bricked shut. Only a small slit was left open, just wide enough to pass food and water. No one saw her face again, so she remained, the wealthiest prisoner in Europe. She wrote letters, many in the beginning, some to her children, begging for mercy, others to the crown, demanding justice. On August 21st, 1614, after 4 years of silent imprisonment, a guard reported no movement behind the wall, no sound, no breath. When they broke open the slit and looked inside, they found her slumped in the corner. Hands folded neatly on her lap, eyes open, staring at nothing. The stone walls of Cachtice Castle still stand, crumbling on a Slovakian hilltop, overgrown with weeds and thorns. Travelers who visit say the air is strangely still, like time refuses to move there. When if you listen at dusk, some claim you can hear it, the splash of water in a forgotten tub, voice humming a lullaby, in a language no one speaks anymore, but is long dead. Or is she, the truth, unraveled in the centuries following her death? Story grew larger than any courtroom could have contained. Writers turned her into myth. Pamphlets called her the Blood Countess. Plays depicted her bathing in crimson tubs. In the 18th century, French historians began linking her with vampire folklore, blending her with Vlad the Impaler to birth the most enduring vampire of all. By the 19th century, she was a ghostly icon of feminine evil, seductive, aristocratic, and merciless. Even Bram Stoker, when crafting Dracula, likely drew inspiration from legend. But was it all true? Monster? Our scapegoat? No preserved diary with 650 names has ever been found. Much of what we know about her crimes comes from confessions obtained under torture, unreliable at best, deliberately manipulated at worst. Modern historians have begun to question the tale. There is no physical evidence that she bathed in blood. And the political motives, they were clear, was a powerful, wealthy, independent woman. Rare and threatening in the early 17th century. She owned vast estates, rivaled even the king in influence, and had no male guardian after her husband's death. Many scholars now suggest she was framed, removing her and claiming her properties under the guise of moral justice. The monarchy benefited. Politically, financially, and socially. The Habsburg crown was deep in debt. Its lands were desirable. And what better way to destroy a woman than to call her a witch, a murderer, a vampire? The blood never dried, but regardless of what is truth and what is fabrication, lives on, not in flesh, but in fear. She has become a symbol. For some, she represents unchecked power, cruelty hidden behind noble lineage. For others, she is a dark feminist icon, punished for being powerful, intelligent, and unafraid. To filmmakers, she's the perfect villain. To conspiracy theorists, she's proof of ancient blood cults. To historians, she's a puzzle with missing pieces. And to the world at large, she's the countess who bathed in virgin blood to stay young. Whether she did or not no longer matters, because legend is a kind of immortality and never died.